BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a world's finest collaboration between Michael K Vaughan and myself, where we combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we have wasted our youths and significant portions of our adulthood. And in this case, boy oh boy does that tell, because we're talking about one of the oldest characters in comic books, Prince Namor the Submariner, whose name will be familiar to quite a few of you, even if you don't know comics, because he was the major bad guy in Wakanda Forever, a billion-dollar Marvel Cinematic Universe movie in which the Submariner was, for some reason, a chubby Aztec, and in which, at the end of the movie, he loses in mano-a-mano combat against, you're wondering, is it Thor? Is it the Hulk? No, it's a skinny and rather frail teenage girl. But aside from that sacrilege, some of us were waiting the better part of a century to see this character in live action. It's never going to happen again. But aside from that, the character has existed since the late 1930s as a superhero and an anti-superhero, as a villain. He's been both. The Submariner started out created by Bill Everett, and he created him. Bill Everett was a bit weird, and his character, his signature character, is also a bit weird. And the story starts in the undersea kingdom of Atlantis, which I want to point out again here. I won't be a killjoy. It does not exist. Plato made it up. But in this comic book, it is an undersea kingdom inhabited by blue-skinned, pointy-eared humans. Basically, they look human. They're not scaly. They don't have gills. They don't have fins or anything like that. They're basically a humanoid race, and they live in this undersea kingdom. And they send an emissary to the surface world, Princess Fen, the daughter of the king of Atlantis. And she meets a studly merchantman, a captain, named Leonard Mackenzie, and she falls in love with him, even though they can't speak to each other, and even though she can only exist out of water for a few hours at a time. And nature takes its course, and soon they have a child, little Namor, Prince of Atlantis. And Leonard Mackenzie is a human, and Princess Fen is an Atlantean, and therefore Prince Namor is a mutant. He is neither Atlantean nor human. He has qualities of both. He has his father's pale skin and his mother's ability to breathe, to extract oxygen from water and live underwater. But he has a whole suite of other abilities that neither one of them possess. He is, for instance, super strong. One of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe, hero or villain. And if you want to know exactly how strong, you would go to a seminal work of reference, which is the Marvel Handbook, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. This is the S volume. There is Prince Namor on the cover. That is the Submariner. He has had that look for 80 years, more or less. We'll get to one major departure, but more or less it's been that look forever. He has pointy ears, sort of arched eyebrows, and he tends to wear green mesh trunks, and that's all. And when we turn to the requisite page for the Submariner in this edition, we see that he is 6'2", that his eyes are blue-gray, that he weighs 300 pounds, that his hair is inky black, and the official handbook of the Marvel Universe tells us that his strength level is 75 tons. That means he can lift, that is, press, 75 tons when he is fully hydrated, either in the water or on land. The longer he's out of the water, the weaker he gets. His lowest ebb of strength is 40 tons, 4 times the strongest Spider-Man. But when he's at his highest rank, he is able to go toe-to-toe with the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe, even more so than you might think. Because when this issue came out for $1, back whenever it came out, fans vociferously wrote in. They got a number of letters just from Boston alone saying, no, the Submariner is considerably stronger than you have listed him. You have him listed as a peak strength of 75 tons. But the handbook of the Marvel Universe is not going by editorial fiat. The editors have combed through 80 years of Marvel Comics in order to determine the limits of these characters based on what we have seen them do. Not based on what a creator, Bill Everett, or anybody else says, just what we've seen them do. So that's how we determine how much a character can lift. That's how we determine how fast a character can run, etc., etc. Fans wrote in. A number of them wrote in, not just from Boston. And so when the Handbook of the Marvel Universe came out in a deluxe edition, see, the deluxe edition, the official Handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition, is widely regarded, at least here in Hyde Cottage, as the greatest single publication in the history of human literacy. And there is a full color, $50 hardcover omnibus of these things, and I don't have it for some reason. I don't have it. But if we turn to the requisite page for the Submariner, there we have a John Byrne illustration, because Byrne was doing the Submariner when this came out. We learned that that has been changed and that his strength is now at 85 tons, which is exactly where it belongs. The fans that wrote in from Boston and elsewhere said the Submariner's peak strength cannot be 75 tons because the Thing, Benjamin J. Grimm, the blue-eyed idol o' millions from the Fantastic Four, has a peak strength of 85 tons, and the Submariner and the Thing go toe-to-toe all the time. They have engaged in direct contests of physical strength, and they have been even. So they change it. But in addition to that, the Submariner is also bulletproof. He's largely invulnerable. Bullets don't hurt him. Artillery fire doesn't really hurt him, which is a factor. His mother is invulnerable to the pressures of the ocean and also completely invulnerable to cold. But she's not invulnerable to gunfire, and the Submariner is. Prince Namor is. And in addition to those things, we're going to leave out any weird or other powers that he has been shown to have from time to time. He doesn't have the ability to imitate the abilities of fish, for instance, or anything like that. But the other ability that he has that neither his mother or his father has is that growing out of his ankles are wing-like appendages. You can see them on the cover here. That despite how small they are, enable him to fly and to carry huge amounts of weight. They grow back if they are removed. We know that from comic book canon. And once again, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe originally said that the Submariner was capable of lifting 75 tons, but he was only capable of carrying about 2 or 3 tons because of those tiny little wings on his ankles. And once again, fans wrote in and said, no, no, you're going by what the comics have shown. And the comics going back to the 1940s have shown that the Submariner can carry almost his full carrying capacity while flying. So you have to change that. And they did. So fans can make a difference. Young Prince Namor has those abilities. So he's not normal Atlantean anyway, because he's next in line to the throne. But he's also immensely powerful. He's Hulk-level power. And he doesn't like humans. He doesn't like his father's people. Soon after his father and his mother are dallying with each other, she ends up dead. And his kingdom of Atlantis ends up bombed and partially or even totally ruined. And this makes the Submariner angry at his father's people, which you have to think, in an Oedipal kind of way, he would have been anyway. But that anger explains the fact that in the Submariner's original appearance in Marvel Comics, back in the late 1930s, one of the first things we see him do is swim up to 2 human divers that have the big metal helmets on that they had at the time, and they have the oxygen tubes going up to the top ship. He swims up, matter-of-factly, to 2 human divers, doesn't say anything to them, isn't posturing or beating his chest or anything, and just crushes their heads inside their helmets. He's the only superhero anywhere, in Marvel or DC, in the last 100 years, who's introduced with an act of casual, premeditated murder. And things just get worse from there, because the Submariner repeatedly invades the surface world and allies himself with some of the worst villains, including Doctor Doom. They had a comic book together called Super Villain Team Up. He routinely invades the surface world. He doesn't like the surface world. That behavior only changes during World War II, when Prince Namor realizes that although humans are bad, Nazis are the worst, and he decides to fight them as part of a team called the Invaders. There he is. Notice, these 2 comics are 30 years apart, and the Submariner looks exactly the same. He looks exactly the same in all of his appearances, except for a little window that we're going to talk about. He joined a team called the Invaders. Captain America, the original Human Torch, who was the other original Marvel Comics hero in addition to the Submariner, and who is an android. And then Captain America, who was invented later for Timely Comics, meaning that the 2 holy trinities of the 2 superhero comic book companies, Marvel and DC, both have original grounding holy trinities of characters. In DC, it's of course Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. In Marvel, it's the Submariner, the original Human Torch, and Captain America. And in both those trilogies, only one person is human. But Marvel now has their later trilogy for when Stan Lee reinvented the company is uh, two humans and one non-human, but still, the Submariner decides to fight the Nazis. You couldn't have a comic book coming out in the 1940s where the hero did not fight the Nazis. You just couldn't do that. And so that is a part of the Submariner's canonical history, is that he spent the war years fighting the Nazis. And the Invaders went for a great number of issues. It was written by Roy Thomas, who had a sweet tooth for nostalgia in comics. And he writes the Submariner in character. The Submariner has had pretty much the same character for the whole of his run. And that is a weird character. No other superhero is quite like it. He isn't fully human, he isn't a superhero, and he isn't all that fond of humanity. You don't know what he's going to do. It's not like all other heroes get to a point, even anti-heroes get to some point where they are pushed morally right to the edge, and they say some version of, if I do that, I'm no better than the people I'm fighting. And Prince Namor cannot be relied upon to ever reach that point. You don't know what he'll do. And it's not trivial. What he'll do is not trivial, because not only is he the leader of apparently a barbaric and warlike people, but he himself can lay waste personally to a human city. Most super teams can't beat him even altogether because he's one of the most powerful characters that Marvel has. And you might think, well, okay, but he's a World War II hero, so what difference does it make? Well, when Stan Lee reinvented comic books with Fantastic Four #1, it didn't take him long to think, well, he's a perfectly good character. No one's using him. No one cares. I'm not going to ask Bill Everett, the creator of the Submariner, I'm not going to ask his permission. I'm just going to bring him back and make him a villain for the Fantastic Four. So the Submariner shows up in Fantastic Four #4. Is it any coincidence that Captain America shows up in Avengers #4? I don't know. Of course, the original Human Torch could not show up because Stan Lee had repurposed the character and the concept and the name for a totally different person. So it takes a while for the original Human Torch to come back. But the Submariner starts showing up in the Fantastic Four as a villain. But still a noble villain. Not an out-and-out bad guy. He's not like Doctor Doom. He's not like the Puppet Master. There's an element of nobility to him. He swoons over Reed Richards' girlfriend, Sue Storm, for instance, and she kind of swoons back. He kidnaps her a few times, but she's never completely unwilling. And that relationship between the two of them blossoms into almost complete infidelity later on when comics grew up and when their readers grew up. That element is handled really well in the Submariner miniseries that just ended. But fans loved it. They absolutely loved it. They loved it when Stan Lee brought back Captain America in the Avengers, and they loved it when he brought back the Submariner in the Fantastic Four. So they wanted more and more and more. So they got it. And we got a chance, those of us who were longtime comic book aficionados, got a chance to see what it would be like if Jack Kirby, the great World War II co-creator of Captain America, drew Bill Everett's signature character, the Submariner. And it was great. It just got better and better. Every time the Submariner appears in the Fantastic Four is better than the time he appears before. But always as more or less a villain, more or less a bad guy. You're not completely sure. He's not gonna be low down or sniveling, but he is pretty much a bad guy. And until much, much later on, fans loved him anyway. They love the moral ambiguity. They love the fact that he can do whatever he pleases. He's not bound by any kind of moral code because he's not, a due-paying member of some team or other. But fans loved him, and writers and editors at Marvel knew that if you have some sort of collective comic book endeavor and you introduce the Submariner, you're going to get thumbs up from all fans. They're going to love that decision no matter what. So, in the 1970s, there was a team, Marvel Comics doesn't do them anymore, but they were called the Defenders, and they actually were born, the concept of the team was born in the Submariner's ongoing comic at the time. The Submariner was introduced as a team member, and everybody loved it. And then later, Roy Thomas got permission to use the Submariner in The Invaders, a book set in World War II, and fans loved it. They just loved it. When he's on a team, he's not the goody two-shoes. He's the guy who's going to say what everyone else is thinking. He's the guy who's going to be sarcastic. He's the guy who's going to say, well, this villain keeps saying that he's going to destroy New York, and he keeps saying that if you put him in prison, He's just going to get out and try again. Why don't we kill him? He's the one who will do that, and that fans love that. They were loving that with Prince Namor long before Wolverine came along to make that fashionable. And even much later on, a writer for the Avengers decided that Captain America is the leader of the team. Why doesn't he just reach out to his old World War II buddy and say, you know, your image is pretty bad. We could rehab your image if you're a member in good standing of the Avengers. And Prince Namor says, yes. Okay, sure. And it works really well. No flare-ups, no invasions of the world or anything like that. So that always worked, that calculus for Marvel editors. But the whole time that was going on, the Submariner was on and off having his own book. He had one in the 1940s. He had one in the 1950s where he was basically a kind of... he and his cousin Namora were kind of like the underwater Hardy Boys. They just had wacky adventures, and it wasn't anything in tone like the Bill Everett creations of the 1940s, and it wasn't anything like the Submariner became later. And when the Submariner got a regular gig in Tales to Astonish, fans loved it, absolutely loved it. They for a while he was drawn by the great Gene Colan, who decided to make him look weird again, because Bill Everett had made the character look weird. He looked human, but you knew that he wasn't fully human. And that Submariner comic, I think it's considered the Bronze Age Submariner comic, went on for a long time and did really well. Marvel didn't quite know, I don't think they quite know what to do with the Submariner. The editorial decision had been made before the Submariner was a backup feature in Tales to Astonish and had all sorts of adventures. And then the decision was made, fans are writing in 2-to-1 wanting the Submariner in his own book, so why don't we give it a try with an issue number 1? And they did, but the editorial decision on the writer, who I think was Roy Thomas, was he's a good guy, okay? If he's going to be in his own book, then he's going to be a good guy. So no more invading the surface world when he gets mad. He has to be a good guy. And writers don't really know what to do with the Submariner if he's just a good guy. He doesn't have any motivation to be a normal superhero, so it doesn't work really well. And it's funny to watch in that the whole of that Bronze Age Submariner. I think I have examples to show you, at least some. Let me see here. I've got the Markbot here to show you what. Yes, okay. Let me see if I can show you. This is, oh my, look at that lovely John Buscema artwork. Oh my. So this is Submariner number 1 that came out for 12 cents, which was real money at the time, and which had just operatically beautiful John Buscema artwork there. He retells the Submariner's origin. There's Princess Fen, and there's the sea captain, and they get married, and the preacher is saying, you may kiss the bride, and one of the mates is saying, they're already way ahead of you, chaplain. Wherever that lady came from, it's a cinch. She ain't going back. Look at that. The two of them like that. Isn't that lovely? How lovely. And Buscema also retells the Submariner's origin story, makes us know that he was 10 times stronger than all of his young compatriots when he was a boy. And that comic, I think this was the Bronze Age. I think this would be considered the Bronze Age. But it continued. I want to show you. It continued issue after issue after issue, and a lot of them were really, really good. This, for instance, What Gods Have Joined Together. This issue was from, I forget the year, but this is Submariner number 36, in which the Submariner plans to marry his longtime love, the Lady Dorma, and the whole issue is broken down. Where were you on the day the Submariner wed? And every little vignette in the chapter is a different person. What was this supervillain doing? What was an ordinary Atlantean doing? What was the Submariner doing? What was Lady Dorma doing? And she dies. And it's done really well. It's done really well in the course of the issue. But as these issues kept going along, Marvel, the editors, the powers that be, made two really interesting decisions. One was to change the Submariner's look for the first time in eons. I want to show you that because it was John Romita Sr., the artist who, when you think of Spider-Man, you're thinking of a visual image that John Romita Sr. created. And John Romita Sr. was given the task of giving the Submariner a new costume. Look at that beautiful cover. Oh, purely beautiful John Romita Sr. artwork. They gave him a new costume. That was a big deal. They also brought back his father. Turns out to still be alive. That was a big deal as well. But the other big deal, I want to show it to you here because it is really amazing. Do I have it on this device? I might not. Oh, wait, I do, yes. Later on uh, in the Submariner's run in the Bronze Age, they gave the book back to Bill Everett. They gave the book back to the Submariner's original creator, whose artwork had grown 10 times better in the intervening years. And it is gorgeous. It's just amazingly detailed, cross-hatched, beautiful stuff. Bill Everett did the scripting, he did the penciling, he did the inking, I think he even did the coloring. It was just a total Bill Everett production. Look at how lovely that is. That they just gave the book back to the character's original creator. I don't think I know of a time when that was ever done before. The closest thing that you would come would be Marvel disastrously in the 1970s gave Captain America back to Jack Kirby. But Jack Kirby created Captain America with Joe Simon. He didn't do it on his own. He wrote that return to Captain America on his own, and boy, oh boy, could you tell. It did not read like an impulsive 8-year-old was writing it, because that would be an insult to impulsive 8-year-olds. It read like an impulsive 8-year-old who'd taken a brick to the head was writing it. That run on Captain America, which I'm sure that Michael K. Vaughan is howling now, because he probably has a $200 hardcover omnibus of that era. But that's the closest that I can think of, where someone just gave a book back to its original creator after so much time, after 40 years. They gave Bill Everett back, the Submariner, and he was on there for a while, probably the better part of a year. What's the matter, baby? Oh, here you go. And it was a delight. For those of us who were shelling out our 20 cents at the time, it was a delight. But the Submariner's issue, his Bronze Age incarnation came to an end, I think, in the 70s. Not 1970s, but in the number of 70. I think it went up to, it didn't get to 100. I know that. Fan interest just dropped off. I think probably because it was a carousel of creators. And you don't want that. If you can avoid it, you don't want that. And once a title is low priority in the Marvel stable, that is when George Tusko will be called on to do the artwork. And that's when you know. That's when you know that, no offense, not the imagery I'm using for the Submariner, but that's when you know that the thing is circling the drain. The Submariner's comic went away, but he showed up in the Invaders and he was in the Defenders. And then later he had a relaunch with #1, written and drawn by John Byrne, the fan favorite artist and writer John Byrne, who did really good. The John Byrne run on the Submariner is really, really good. But the most interesting thing about it is that John Byrne looked at the character's history and thought, something's wrong here. Why is it that this character is half the time an upstanding hero fighting the Nazis and helping kittens out of trees, and the other half the time raging against humanity and invading Manhattan? Why is that? And Byrne came up with an answer. I don't know if that answer is still canonical. I rebelled against it at first, but then the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Which is that Prince Namor's mutant, mixed heritage background created a blood enzyme imbalance that occasionally made him functionally crazy. And that if he could take medicine to fix that, he would not be functionally crazy anymore. It was kind of interesting. It was kind of well done. And Byrne also, John Byrne cut his teeth on Marvel Comics at right about the same time I did, so he really enjoys nostalgia as well as Roy Thomas did. So he brought back the original Human Torch in the Avengers and had the original Human Torch and the Submariner and Captain America together again after World War II. That comic lasted for a long time. Byrne drew it for a long time. Then he gave the art tours over to Jay Lee, who was really good, did a totally different job, but really interesting. But then that petered out, and the Submariner has bounced around for Marvel Comics ever since. Doesn't have a book of his own now. Just got finished with a miniseries. But it was set in a possible future. What the character is doing now, we don't know. He doesn't. I don't know what would happen if Marvel Comics, of course, in 2023, would never launch a Submariner #1. They would never do that. Unless it was the chubby Aztec from the movie, which I don't think they would do, because that is not at all what the character is. Marvel has a visual guidebook for what characters look like. They've had that from the beginning, since Stan Lee took over. John Romita Sr. is the one who made a lot of that book. You don't vary from it. And they did. I want to show you an example of when that style book was varied from. There was a run on a comic called Dark Reign, and it was a group of it was a period in comic book history. It's really interesting. It was the Dark Avengers. I hope that Michael and I get to it at some point. The Avengers were suddenly led by Norman Osborn, and they were composed of villains who were masquerading as heroes for the public. So the public didn't know who they were. And the Submariner was on that team. And this is what he was allowed to look like. No idea why, but that was a long time. It was 20 years ago, and where the character is now, what Marvel's going to do with one of their absolute hallmark characters, I do not know. I wish that they would get their act together. I wish that they would have, bring the character back, keep him standard according to the book, and just give us more Submariner adventures. But I think the John Byrne run is the last time we will ever see that happen. But anyway, that brings us up to the present day. In case you haven't got the impression, I love the Submariner. I absolutely love this character. Had all of those comics, bought them all, read them over and over and over again. Loved seeing him appear in the Defenders. Bought every issue of the Invaders. Bought the gigantic $100 hardcover omnibus edition that has all of those issues in it. I of course was collecting the Avengers when he just became a member of the team. Just a member of the team. It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful to see. Added an element of history, because Captain America joins the team once they get him out of suspended animation. And so readers of the Avengers are thinking, well, okay, so his old-time compatriots are the original Avengers who get him out of suspended animation. But actually, he led a superhero team 40 years before. He and the Submariner go way back, is what I'm trying to say. And so I love the character. I was glad that Michael K. Vaughan picked him. And who knows if this gladness will carry over to next week. Michael is doing the picking. Could be really bad. We don't know. Today it was fun. Today we had the Submariner, which is always fun. We'll see what next week brings. We'll find out together. So I will wrap this up. I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.